Test, test. Got away. Sorry about that. Huh?
Hi guys, welcome to the second talk. I'd like to give a brief information. In the lounge there are 3 fridges, so we can take as much water as you want. So it's at the moment still a little hot in here. It will cool down over time. So just please feel free and take some water if you need it. We'll start off with our second talk with Rodney Rehm. He has about 10 years experience with web development. He's currently employed by the German Telecom. Enjoy his talk about coping with the broken web. Thank you.
Hey guys. Okay, so coping with the broken web. Sweet. Where I'm from, I created this JavaScript library called URI.js. I was extremely annoyed by how JavaScript did not allow me to work with URLs at all. So that's my JavaScript experience. I put that up into article up on Smashing Magazine, which is basically the foundation for how you should design your APIs whenever you write JavaScript applications. And in short, I just like making stuff simple. And this has carried through to my work, where a colleague recently came by and asked me if I could help him with a library, some snippet actually, that would allow him to transition one slide to the other and just have this very simple, basic JavaScript block. And I was like, sure, that's the stuff I do. I'll write it for you. After 2 days, I gave up on the task because no single browser did what I expected it to do. If it worked in Chrome, it failed in Firefox. If it did something in Internet Explorer, Opera was going, eh. So I found myself in a position that I just couldn't cope with this. It did not work. I read the specification. I couldn't get it working. So what do I mean by broken? I mean, the web's not broken, it's working. You're sitting here and probably each and every one of you has a pretty well-paid job and having lots of fun doing what you're doing. Can't be that bad, can it? Well, here's some CSS, which actually complies to the specification. But if you were to run this in Chrome, you'd get some weird results. You know, the transition runs twice, and instead of getting like one event that it stopped, you're getting tons. How are you supposed to write a library to cope with that? So Chrome is broken. What about Firefox? Well, I actually had to adjust this slide on Tuesday because they actually fixed the bug. Then we have old Opera. This is pre-Blink, though. It just does nothing. Okay. And quite cool toy, IE10. This is not the Internet Explorer you are used to, because it freaking works. Another simple demo. You see the foo bar. The specification says any property that you do not understand, you just keep it in place and ignore it, so all the other properties that you do understand can transition just fine. Well, that doesn't work in Chrome. Again, Firefox just fixed that bug in 23 something, I think. Opera, same story, just does nothing. You're not getting any events. You're not being told that something is happening or nothing is happening. You have no way of finding out if this transition would actually work. And again, Internet Explorer does what it's supposed to. But we don't have to go. We don't have to look at the new stuff. We can look at decades-old functionality, like the select element. I mean, have you ever tried working with that thing? Someone reported a bug that some nested select element wouldn't work as they expected, and I was completely stumped, because what the hell? So I started manually testing all the browsers for which events they would fire if I would move my mouse over the thing, click on it, go down a couple of options, click on them again, and hello, Firefox? It's like, what are you doing? Okay. You can't fix this. I actually had to reject the bug. Chrome, on the other hand, once you clicked the select element and the option got selected, and you move your mouse slightly, only then will it fire the mouse out, whereas every other browser would just go, okay, fine, I did that after the click. What? So that's what I mean by the web is broken. It works on a general level, but there's all these tiny, tiny problems. That's what you think you get. A specification says what it's supposed to do, and you think you can just go straight ahead and implement that stuff. but the reality is more like one pothole after the other. So check your assumptions. In fact, check your assumptions at the door, meaning whenever you get into developing something new, working with some new specifications, some new stuff, don't assume you know what it's supposed to do, because not even your browser does. But is that a reason to just fold and go home? No, it's not. It's time to grab our lab coats and have some fun with this stuff. So, what's fun? Fun is, at some point, knowing what is actually happening in your browser. To achieve that, you have to write some tests. The colleague that asked me to write that piece of JavaScript so he could do his transitions in 3 lines of JavaScript without ever knowing what the CSS actually does, I failed at it. But I failed because I didn't know what the browser did, right? Every browser did something different. So I came up with writing some tests, trying to automate what the browsers are doing. And there's the first problem. You have like many browsers, you have many small tests. It's how do you work with those results? I mean, you start out with a simple result page. Anyone's done unit testing, I think, right? Unit testing, anyone? Hands up. Who's not done unit testing? Okay, that's pretty awesome. 3 hands, no unit testing. Big thumbs up. So this is a regular result page. Stuff is working, stuff is broken, but it gets quite confusing once you have to run those tests in like 5 browsers. And we're not even counting the mobile ones. So you need to come up with something that allows you to grok your results. Simple aggregation will do it. But you can overdo it as well. You want specific tests. Does this transition work if I give it a percentage? Does it work if I give it a pixel value? The browser actually does different things in those circumstances, right? So you want to check those. And you're not going to get a clear picture out of this. So you want to go and summarize that stuff to quickly see, okay, that's working properly. Here I'm just missing events. This does nothing at all. And you get a semi-clear picture. So what do you need? What did I use to actually create those tests? Well, I needed something to run them. There are a couple of options. You have Mocha, QUnit, Jasmine, and there's tons of others. Coming from a jQuery-centric background, I obviously chose QUnit. But that didn't quite work out that well, and a couple of friends recently attended the Test Web Forward in Paris and told me to go using testharness, which is just another test runner with one tiny difference. You have all this metadata in your tests that explain what you're testing, referenced the specifications, the pieces that you're actually testing in detail, whatever, and give some info about the test. Like this test is going to manipulate the DOM, so you'll need to, if you run this test, you need to have a DOM. You can't run it in Node, for example. While that is pretty cool, having all those links given, I mean, now you can actually reference a specification and a test, right? Testharness did come with a couple of problems. One of them being it doesn't have any scheduling. I mean, QUnit would just go, oh, run an async test. Okay, fine, I'll do that for you. I'll just schedule them. You have 20 asynchronous tests, I'll run them one after the other. Testharness doesn't do that. They'll just go straight ahead and run all at the same time, which is nice if you know what you're doing. because you can actually parallelize testing, which in my particular case helped me to come down from 15 minutes of running the entire suite to 2, I think. But of course, I had to write lots of helper functions, which are available on GitHub. I don't know if they're going to make their way into testharness itself. So, aggregating results. Well, you've got 5 different browsers. You want the result data in one place. You know, JSPerf, pretty nifty tool to check if your algorithms work as you expected, which one's faster, it's pretty cool. They use browser scope. So I thought, easy, let's use that too. But it has a couple of problems. One of them being, once you've set up a test suite, the table is fixed. So it will actually create a database table that is fixed. You cannot add a new test to a set. If you were to add new tests or change something, you would have to run the entire batch again and again and again. So that seemed kind of tedious. Right around that time, Firebase started popping up in beta. This is a really cool service that will allow you to have a JSON database. It's like you connect to this Firebase thingy, you get events whenever data was changed, so you can actually implement live tables, 2 browsers showing the same page. You click a button in the one browser and it shows up in the other one with 1 line of JavaScript. You don't have to care about anything. It's awesome. I think they're out of beta now. So if you need some place to store your data, definitely have a look at Firebase. Well, so we know how to look at results, we know how to store the results, but how do we even run the stuff? And that's my table. Do have a couple of mobile devices there. Very important, coffee and your towel, right? You gotta have a towel for testing. It's sweat driving. Okay. So if your desk doesn't look like that, Browser Stack is a pretty cool place to start because they have virtual machines for pretty much anything. Firefox 3, really? Okay. And while you're at it, you want nice tables. You want to have a cool representation of which browser you're running, right? Which browser am I currently using? There's a piece of JavaScript called platform.js. They, again, use that one on browser scope, which will actually give you a nice representation of the thing we call the user agent. Which is, you don't want to pause that. No, you don't. And as always, something will go wrong. Be prepared for anything. So this is nice. I created all these things myself. I had to. There is no real central system yet. I was testing CSS functionality. The CSS stuff is done by the CSS working group, right? That is not the same as a HTML working group. They're different kinds of people. The CSS working group actually has a testing repository, but they're using Mercurial. What? HG? Why? HTML working group has their stuff running on GitHub, something you immediately know how to use because you've been using GitHub for ages. The CSS working group has another thing on top of the repository. It's called the shepherd. The shepherd is some UI to try to make sense of the billions of test cases that are in there. But, well, it's not the coolest tool you could use, I think. Anyway, the CSS working group has a problem with their tests. they have tons of tests, but over a third of them aren't even reviewed yet. Like, people have submitted tests that are just not accepted yet, and there's nothing really happening there. So all the tests I wrote, and or a bunch, they're still in review, like 8 months later. This is not a fun place to work in. I mean, the environment sucks. You actually, the only way I could make sense of this CSS testing framework was by heavy email communication with its creator. There was bad documentation, if at all, and all these nifty little tricks you had to apply to actually get stuff running, you only got by mail. So that kind of sucked. It sucked because things are about to change. So there's this guy, Toby. Toby works for Facebook. He's borrowed out to the W3C for a year, so he could go fix this testing infrastructure they have or have not. So he's been at it since February, I think. They actually started writing code and creating stuff like 2 months now. And they've started with the easy stuff, apparently easy stuff. Like, who owns a test? Who can contribute? Anyone who's ever contributed a patch to the likes of Adobe know that you have to read this huge pile of crap and print it, sign it, send it somewhere, just so you can get your patch landed. They got rid of that, so whatever you push to GitHub is just accepted. Moving to GitHub. They're trying to get the entire testing framework to move to GitHub. The CSS working group as well, the HTML working group is already there. And the metadata I demoed earlier, that's the stuff, oh, well, no, that comes later, sorry. So they wrote a parser for all the specifications to get a feeling for which pieces of the specification actually need testing. So they created the foundation for test coverage. That's already in place. Right now they're doing the linking, so you can would actually be able to put a link in the specification to this is your test, and it's failing, it's passing, whatever. So you have bidirectional linking. They're going to make sure this whole ecosystem, they're essentially going to build a new ecosystem. They want the tests to be run in the cloud, meaning that some web service will go through them like twice a day, build up a compatibility table with all the results, which in turn will be our basis to integrate in all sorts of websites. You know, can I use the page we frequently open to see if something already works? That is exactly what I'm talking about, but generated automatically for one thing, and the other thing, a test is not a test. So all those CSS working group tests, they go into detail. They find the tiny things. The can I use would just say, yeah, go ahead. Transitions work fine in Chrome for ages. What they do, sort of, but you have like, I found 35 bugs, I think, that would just destroy you if you tried to do something other than a very, very simple transition. And the web platform, they're going to integrate everything into the web platform. Anyone was at the doc sprint yesterday? Yeah. Right. So this is the new central system for documentation, primarily, created by pretty much everyone. Google, Mozilla, Opera, Apple, everyone. And they're building up this central documentation that would also cover every CSS property. So such a documentation page is the perfect place to link to all those tests, have the results in an aggregated fashion right there in the documentation of how it works. So you don't have to have a look at 10 websites anymore to get your stuff rolling. And Sauce Labs. Who of you knows Sauce Labs? Sauce Labs is a testing environment. They have lots of VMs, just like Browser Stack, but it's more Selenium-like, so you've got an API to run tests across that sort of stuff. And Sauce Lab is donating their infrastructure to the W3C to run all those tests for us on every single browser there is, on mobile devices, not mobile devices per se, but there are simulators, but really doesn't matter. All that stuff that I had to do manually is going to be taken care of by 2014-ish. I'm told the W3C isn't the fastest place. So all this comes by the name Test the Web Forward. It was actually Adobe who created that movement to get people like you involved in testing specifications against browsers. And this is going to be the thing the entire W3C testing will run on. So they're working on it. It was a very tiresome place earlier this year. It's going to be okay-ish in January, and it's going to be cool by the end of next year. So why would anyone want to write tests? Huh? Well, the tests you write with testharness and this W3C testing framework are run by those people that actually write the specification. They are able to run in the unit testing frameworks the browser engines themselves have. So whatever test you write for some little bug will eventually make its way right to Google, right to Mozilla, and just tell the engineers, hey, I'm not transitioning properly. Again, this is not happening soon. This is a 2014 preview, but that's going to be the place we're going to be living in. And you get loads of collected data. I tested the complete CSS transition specification. I identified something around 35 bugs, 50 quirks in total. And I wrote an article about that, published on Smashing Magazine. That's the kind of stuff you get out of testing. You have data to write articles. You can give workshops on that stuff. You get to talk about it. You get the necessary street credibility on the web. Because whenever you try to engage with people in the standards bodies, well, making sure they know that you know what you're doing is probably a good thing. So learning about specifications or the specification you're testing is a bonus. So if I can do it, you can do it. You're a part of the web. That's why you're here. And we'd all much appreciate it if we'd all start caring for the web a bit more. So whenever the web is not doing what you want, fight back. Write tests. And we're at the recap. So testharness is a pretty decent test runner. Go have a look at it if you do some specification testing. Firebase is a pretty awesome database to use for your web applications. It's just register and it works. You want to be testing real browsers. And if you don't have too many devices, just go and use browser stack for now. And please don't wait for the W3C to get their act together. Just have some fun testing now. And that's it. I'm done. Any questions? Any questions? No?
Sorry, really stupid question.
There are no stupid questions. Go ahead.
I'm going to embarrass myself. Well, that's pretty loud. I'm going to embarrass myself here. So say I found something wrong, inherently wrong with what I'm working on. Can we, like, a real quick process on how we would go through testing that? How would I found something with the transition and it's not working right. I go to, everybody's looking at me, so it must be really dumb.
How would you get started right now with this stuff?
Right.
That's the question. Well, before I get into how you do it now, let's have a look at how you will be doing it in a year's time. The web platform org is going to have an interface that will allow you to simply add small tests to the bunch without having to know anything about the ecosystem that is behind it. That's the future. That's where we're headed. Right now, you actually have to know the entire ecosystem to get your stuff running. A very, very good place to start if you're interested in testing is attending one of Adobe's Test the Web Forward events. Test the Web Forward org. There is going to be one, I think, in the first quarter next year in Germany, probably, something like that. Yeah. So there is no easy access right now. There's going to be. I'm just trying to getting ahead of them in the way that you see that there's testing possible and testing going on. Does that answer your question? Sort of. I'm sorry, there is no good news to this. Okay. There is hope, there's lots of hope. This is going to be awesome. Again, in 2 years.
Okay, then we got a question on Twitter from Fabian. He's asking, is there a page to track the progress of the W3C testing work done?
The page is called Skype, and the handle is Toby. He's, I'm sorry, Toby. He's already overdue with a couple of blog posts explaining the progress they've made. So the little bits of information I was able to share today actually came from a call last week. So no, there is no public site that tracks the progress yet. There will be, because it's going to be awesome. Any more questions?
Thanks. Yeah, I recently, it might be a little of a specific question, but I recently ran into the problem that I wanted position fixed and momentum scrolling on mobile phones. And I soon realized that there are tons of feature detection frameworks and everything, and they detect lots of stuff like Canvas and everything. But when it comes to the really basic stuff, like you showed with this drop-down shit, there are so many browsers that behave completely differently that I was wondering if there is actually a testing framework available that shows you the compatibility with CSS2 features, with like position fixed and momentum scrolling or overflow scrolling.
Yes and no. So there is a complete suite for the CSS 2.1 specifications, I think. It's up on the CSS working group's testing framework called Shepherd. But those are just the tests. You're not going to get any really cool results out of it yet. There is, however, some new meta level that would try to show you a compatibility table. I'm not sure how well that has progressed since January. So they're trying to make that stuff happening because people realize we need that sort of stuff. We need the deep insights and the general overview, but we're just not quite there yet. So right now, it's still up to you to test and fix yourself.
So in the worst case, we can still hack the user agent string and get real nasty.
Please don't do that, no.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Sweet. Any more questions?
Hi, I was wondering if there's any movement to get the test results back into the code editor. So I remember like Aptana used to have this thing, if a CSS property wasn't supported, it would show like a little icon next to it, like the Internet Explorer icon.
Okay, that is a very, very good question. The web platform initiative as a whole has a different target than just providing you a web-based view of the documentation. It is supposed to feed applications with the documentation stuff, right? So I've already said they're going to integrate the testing results and the tests themselves into those documentation pages. So in essence, yes, there will be a possibility to call an API to get the docs and the feature parity of, I don't know, a CSS property. But we're getting there. That is like 2015 or something. This stuff is moving slow, which is why I'm trying to open your eyes to it so you might find it interesting and try to get engaged in this sort of stuff. Because we do need the movement as a whole of web development. We need that stuff. Okay. Good. Then I think up next is lunch. Bon appetit.
All right, as Rodney already said, it's lunchtime. It's nice weather outside, so you'll be able to eat outside. There is a space available for you to enjoy then the sun there. Enjoy your lunch.